Hello everybody, this is Yasmeen from Yarkspiri fantasyart.com and welcome to another week's tutorial. For this week's tutorial, the main request was that I actually paint a plant sorceress facing off to a Dark Mage. Now, before I started on this image, I actually contemplated roughly what angles I would actually work out and use for this piece, but I didn't actually do some preliminary sketches. So essentially I already had a general idea of what I was going to do for it before I actually started painting out the actual rough portion of this painting. So as you can see, I started off with a really rough guide for my perspective, and I just free-handed that with a really rough brush. Now for the majority of this painting I will be using a textured brush from an artist called Darken. If you go to darken.com, he actually has free brushes for download if you want to try it out. And I'm actually using a couple of those brushes. The main one that I ended up using was actually used for, I think, adding rust and painting with rust. Now, obviously I didn't use it for that purpose. Now, what I was doing as I was working on this painting is I was actually using that brush to actually do all the line art, everything. Now, the reason why I actually chose to use this brush is that I did want to have a more gritty style to the overall painting. And the best way to get essentially a different look to your painting is to actually just change up your brushes. So in this case, I actually used a much more rough brush to do this painting. I do sometimes use this painting, especially when I'm working between Photoshop and Illustrator, on a series that I previously did actually, and I'm currently finishing up right now, where I'm doing essentially the 7 Sins, but with this brush and alternating between this and Illustrator. I am mostly using this brush. The reason why is because of the texture that it adds, and when I essentially trace out in Illustrator the final image, is I'm able to get that texture that actually shows through. And that's the reason why I'm using this brush in this painting, is I wanted the texture to really show throughout the painting. I didn't want to have any hard edges. I wanted to have some more textured edges to the final lines, so the best way to do it was to use this painting brush. Now, what I did after I did my initial sketches, as you saw earlier, I actually added a color layer to make it easier to figure out the general color palette. Now, since the sorceress had to actually be plant-oriented, because that was her main ability, is to manipulate foliage and plants, I went with a green palette for her, but then toned down the colors actually in the Dark Mage to give him more of a gloomy atmosphere. So his ability actually tends to remove almost some of the colors that he actually has within his character. So this is an element that I did want to incorporate in the final painting, and by using the color layer I was able to achieve this by essentially erasing out any colors that I didn't need and keeping it toned down. Now, this entire painting actually didn't take too long at all. It took between 3 to 4 hours to actually complete this entire painting start to finish, which is extremely quick considering some of the details that I did add in to this painting. Now, this painting is painted also with a different style than what I normally do. The main focus is to keep it rough and to keep it gritty and almost unfinished, but not quite. So, obviously, because of that, I don't have to finalize all my lines. I need to hint at a finalized line, but it doesn't need to necessarily be extremely crisp. Now, since the mage is also in armor of some sort, he does have a lot of cloth in his actual clothing elements. I did want to tie in some of the same elements into the female figure as well. So what I did is, because she is using foliage and she's more plant-like, I did want to have almost a leaf-like aspect to it. So for her design, what I did is I tried to simulate that by using very specific colors and essentially giving it almost a scale light appearance to essentially simulate the leaves that she might be using for her wardrobe. And this turned out pretty good, actually. The overall painting really did help showcase that quite well. Now, what I just did is I just added a color burn layer to the overall painting, and this is allowing me to slowly darken up some key areas, for which I can then sample those colors into a new layer and start painting off of that. So although I do use the color burn tool, I do use it to a certain degree just to essentially increase my color palette from which to work with. Because otherwise, if I'm using the scrollers, I find that I don't have as much control, whereas I could use the rough brush and just paint it out slowly and say, okay, that's the color I'm going to go with for my darkest colors. I think that's dark enough. So this helps to actually speed up some of my painting process by simply just adding a color rather than trying to play with the scroll bar for that. Instead, I could just do it this way. So I'm just adding some of the finalized detail in the sorceress, and I'm finalizing the light. As you can see, I needed to really punch up some of the colors and the lighting to really help have the full range of colors that I'm looking for. So this is the finalized image. As you can see, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you and take care.